So the steps today, just like the first two, so we are going to hide it through an acronym or through a word na tatawagin nating tatay. Okay, good day, my dear students. So, again, we are going to discuss today another lesson. So, this is now lesson number 3. So, for today's lesson, we are going to discuss solving quadratic equation by completing the square. So, another method in solving quadratic equation. So, we're through on using extracting the roots. Then we're through on using factoring as a method. Then this time, the third one is by using completing the square. So in this lesson, you are here going to find out on how completing the square uh, is to be used in solving quadratic equation. So how are we going to apply it? So that's what we are going to find out in this lesson. So to start with, so there are also important things that we have to take note first in order for us to solve quadratic equation by completing the square. The first thing we are going to find out or to know is one important thing is what we call perfect square trinomial. O yung tinatawag natin na PST. So what are those what we call perfect square trinomial? We do have what we call quadratic trinomial. And we also have what we call perfect square trinomial. It's like a special kind of trinomial. Why? Why it's called as perfect square trinomial? So, it is perfect square trinomial. It's because its first term and its last term are perfect squares. So, we know already when a given variable with an exponent is a perfect square. And we know already when a given number is a perfect square. And that is by multiplying a number by itself, the answer is a perfect square. So if your first term and your last term is a perfect square, then um, that's one thing na para malaman natin that a given trinomial is a perfect square trinomial because there is another thing. That middle term of the trinomial, the middle term of the trinomial is twice the product of the square root of the first and its last term. Twice the product of the square root of the first and the last term. So that's what makes a perfect square trinomial special because of those things. So aside from perfect square trinomial or PST, another important thing which is needed in solving quadratic equation by completing the square is the expression b over 2 quantity squared. So that expression is very important. It's because that expression will help us in finding a number or finding a term that will make us form a perfect square trinomial. Later on, through examples, we'll find out kung paano ba natin kinukuha yung number na yan that will make us form perfect square trinomial. So for now, let us remember that the expression b over 2 quantity squared is important also in solving quadratic equation by completing the square. So, just like the first two methods in solving quadratic equation, uh, we are also here going to apply certain steps in order for us to easily or in order for us to have a guide in solving a certain problem. So here, for us to have a guide in solving quadratic equation by completing the square, we are also going to apply certain steps. So the steps today, just like the first two, so we are going to hide it through an acronym or through a word na tatawagin nating tatay. So bakit nga ba, tatay, yung steps natin in solving quadratic equation by completing the square? Tatay, yun yung sinasabing haligi ng tahanan. So, first of all, you're not here without your father. Wala ka sa mundong ito kung wala sa tatay mo. And also, yung may isang araw sa isang taon na sineselebrate natin yung Father's Day. That is to give thanks to our Father na naging dahilan kung bakit tayo nandito sa mundong ibabaw. So, whether you hate or you love your father so much, still it doesn't change the fact that he is your father. He is the reason why you're here. So, yung hatred, kung meron man, mawawala rin yan soon. Pero yung tatay mo, pag nawala yan, wala na. Because, nag-iisa lang yan eh. Yan lang yung nag-iisang dahilan kung bakit ka nandito eh. Together with your mother. So, pag nawala yung tatay mo, wala na. So, habang nabubuhay ka, show your father that you love them, that you love him, you love your father. So hindi man sa mga paraan na pagiging showy, pero sa mga ibang bagay katulad ng pagsunod sa utos, katulad ng katulad nung mga bagay na for example, mga gusto niya, nabibigay mo yung mga gusto niya. So in that way, napapasaya natin yung mga tatay natin. Well, I'm sure yung mga tatay natin are proud of us. Proud sila sa atin. Kapag sila sasama-sama ng mga kaibigan nila. So, I'm sure binibida nila yung mga anak nila. So, if their children are doing good in a certain thing, for example sa pag-aaral, so binibidan nila yung mga anak nila. So hindi nyo lang nakikita, pero pag sila ay nagsama-sama magkakaibigan, so nagpapayabangan sila ng mga anak nila. So dapat gawin natin tama. So what if you're not good as a son or a daughter? So, di ba? Anong maikikwento ng tatay mo doon? So, makikinig lang siya? Di ba? So, hindi man ibig sabihin na kailangan mo maging maging matalinong estudyante. Kasi yung pagiging matalino hindi naman nasusukat. Yung magiging ikaw in the future sa pagiging matalino mo o sa pagtatapos mo ng pag-aaral. But iba pa rin syempre may natapos ka sa pag-aaral. Syempre, mas madaling maghanap ng trabaho kapag nakatapos ka ng pag-aaral. So, as I was saying, hindi naman kailangan maging magaling ka o matalino kang estudyante. So, by just simply obeying your father or obeying things na gusto niyang gawin mo is already enough para malaman ng tatay mo na proud siya sa'yo. So, enough na yun. So, hanggat kayo, bata pa kayo, so you still have time para ipakita sa mga tatay ninyo kung gaano nyo sila pinapahalagahan, kung gaano nyo sila minamahal. So, it's not yet too late. So, wag nating hintayin dumating yung time na huli na yung lahat. So, mas maganda, gawin na ngayon nang hindi na humantong dun sa pagkakataon na maging huli ang lahat. So, that's our steps in solving quadratic equation by completing the square. So, ano nga ba yung tatay na yan? So, let's start with T. The first T stands for transform the given equation in the form ax squared plus bx is equal to c, where a is equal to 1. So look at the given equation here. So here, it's required that if you're going to use completing the square as a method, from the general form, the quadratic equation, where c is on the left side, you're going to move that to the right side of the equation. So, dapat, on the left side of the equation are just the linear term, or just the quadratic term, and the linear term. While on the right side is just the constant term. And also, another condition here is that your A should be equal to 1. Ito dapat value ng A na to, dapat yan ay 1. So, if that is not 1, you still have to make it 1 first by simplifying it. So, dapat we have to make that value of the value of A here na 1. In that case, mas madali nating may apply yung completing the square as a method in solving quadratic equation. Also, completing the square is a method being used when factoring is not available as a method in solving a certain quadratic equation. It's because if you cannot apply sum and product method or even AC method, then maybe completing the square will help us in solving that kind of equation. So again, you have to write first your equation in the form ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Then second step, the first A stands for add both sides of the equation by b over 2 quantity square to form PST or perfect square trinomial on the left side of the equation. Yun, kanina binanggit natin yung b over 2 quantity squared. That plays a very important role in order for us to solve quadratic equation by completing the square. Kasi sabi dito, that b over 2 quantity square will help us form PST. Makaka-form dapat tayo ng perfect square trinomial on the left side of the given quadratic equation na naka-transform in this form of the equation. So magkakaroon siya ngayon ng bagong constant dito. That constant na i-add natin on this comes from the expression b over 2 quantity squared. So nasaan yung b na yon na sinasabi natin? That b is the numerical coefficient of the linear term in the given quadratic equation. So itong b na to, whatever number is the value of that, so just divide it by 2, then square that number, that would be the number to be added on both sides of the equation. On both sides pa rin tayo, it's because since we are still dealing with equation, so again, whatever you do on one side, you will also do that on the other side. So it's not just only that you are going to add it on the left side, but also on the right side of the equation. So second, using b over 2 quantity squared is needed. The value of it will be added on both sides of the equation for us to form perfect square trinomial. Next step, second T. Second T stands for then factor the left side and use extracting the roots afterwards. So, dalawang method pa lang magagamit natin. Since we already know extracting the roots as a method in solving quadratic equation, then after adding the value of b over 2 quantity squared on both sides of the equation, this left side of the equation now will become perfect square trinomial. So, the factor of a perfect square trinomial is a square of binomial. The binomial that was raised to the second power. Just like an example that we answer when we discuss extracting the roots. That binomial that inside the parentheses that was raised to the second power. So that will if we factor that perfect square trinomial, ganun yung mangyayari. Then if that will happen, we are now going to use extracting the roots afterwards. So we are now going to apply extracting the roots. So just like how we solved that example when we discussed extracting the roots before. So ganun na yung gagawin natin. Then after that, so the second A stands for and solve the resulting equation. Diba ginagawa natin? When we remove the square in that square of binomial by getting the square root of both sides by using extracting the roots, so mawawala na yung square doon. Then we are going to find the root of the constant term, which is the positive and the negative root of it. So we can solve it by separating the two equations, by separating the two signs, by forming two equations for us to easily come up with the solutions to a given quadratic equation. So we are going to separate the positive and the negative sign of the roots of a given number for us to come up with the solutions to a quadratic equation. Then last, Y stands for you check using the given equation. So as I was saying, as I told you before, so for you to check using the given equations, once you already found out the solution to that equation, so since there are two, so you are going to substitute first one to the first solution to the original equation given, then also you're going to substitute the second solution to that same original given equation. So if it satisfies the equation, then ibig sabihin your answer is correct. So you you're you are doing right in solving a quadratic equation by completing the square. So again, in order for us to solve quadratic equation by completing the square, all you have to do is to remember si tatay. Okay, so this time, let's proceed on applying the steps through examples. So we are going to solve here quadratic equation by using completing the square. So let's have example number 1. So we do have the given, for example, x squared minus 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. So the first thing you're going to do when there's a given quadratic equation and you are asked to solve that quadratic equation by completing the square is to do it first or arrange it first in a form wherein the constant term is on the right side of the equation. So the first thing we are going to do is to move this constant term to the right side of the equation. So when you do that, we'll have x squared minus 2x minus equal to positive 3. Because when you move negative 3 to the right side, it will become positive 3. Then from there, we are going to apply b over 2 quantity squared. So, what's the purpose of that expression of b over 2 quantity squared? The purpose of that is to make this binomial on the left side of the equation a perfect square trinomial. That means we are going to add a certain number there, particularly on that left side and also on the right side, to make that left side a perfect square trinomial. We can do that by applying the expression b over 2 quantity squared. What is that b that we are pertaining to? So we are pertaining to the numerical coefficient. So the numerical coefficient of a is 1 while c is negative 3. So the b that we are pertaining to is negative 2. So all you have to do is substitute it to the given expressions, we do have negative 2 divide by 2. This is in place of b, negative 2, and quantity squared. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. And negative 1 squared is 1. So that means that number 1 is the number to be added on both sides of the equation to make the left side perfect square trinomial. So it will become x squared minus 2x plus 1 equal to 3 plus 1. So, ito yung number na nakuha natin dito kanina. Ang ginamit natin yung b over 2 quantity squared. So, that number is to be added on both sides of the equation. So, in that case, this left side is already a perfect square trinomial. So, ano bang factors niyan? Ang factors ng perfect square trinomial ay square of binomial. So, how are you going to factor it? You simply get the square root of the first term and get the square root of the last term. And look at the operation of the middle term. So that forms the factors of it. Then that binomial factor is to be squared. So square root of x squared is x. The operation of the middle is minus. The square root of 1 is 1. Then quantity squared. Then it will be equal to 3 plus 1. That would be 4. Then since we are already in this form of the equation, so natatandaan ba yung nag-solve tayo extracting the roots? So we are going to treat this binomial inside as one term. So for us to eliminate 2 here, we're going to get the square root of both sides of the equation. So in that case, that square root sign together with this 2 will be eliminated. So may iwan ngayon ay x minus 1 is equal to square root of 4. That would be positive negative 2. Diba? When we apply extracting the roots, when we get the square root of a certain number, that is not just the positive root, but also the negative root of it. Then from here, so we are going to now solve for its solution. So we can now move this constant term to the right side of the equation. So in that case, magpo-form tayo ng dalawang equation by separating this plus or minus. So we do have here x is equal to 1 plus 2. Then the other one is x is equal to 1 minus 2. Nakakasunod tayo so far? So, ito yung plus, ito yung minus na nanggaling dito. So, when we move negative 1 to the right side of the equation, it's either we move it before, after 2, or before the plus or minus. Pero mas maganda kung before or plus or minus para pag sinulat natin siya, pag pinaghiwalay natin yung plus or minus sign, that would be the operation of it. So, now let's solve for the value of the variable. For x sub 1, here, we do have 1 plus 2, which is equal to 3. So that would be our first solution. Now, for x sub 2, that would be equal to 1 minus 2. So that would be equal to negative 1. So the solution to the given quadratic equation are 3 and negative 1. So we solve that by using completing the square, using the method na tinatawag natin completing the square. So kung medyo naguguluhan pa kayo, let's try to answer another example. Okay, let's have this example now. So that would be number 2. X squared plus 10x is equal to negative 16. So in the case of example number 2, so it's already arranged in the right form of the equation so that we can use right away the method na tinatawag nating completing the square. So that means we are going to look right away for the number to be added on both sides of the equation. And that is by using again b over 2 quantity squared. So what would be the value of b? The value of b is 10. So that the b that we are pertaining to, that is the numerical coefficient of the linear term. So b is 10, substitute it to the equation. So that would be 10 divided by 2 quantity squared. So 10 divided by 2, that would be 5, then quantity squared. So 5 times 5, that's not 5 times 2, that's 5 times 5 will be 25. So that number 25, that is the number to be added on both sides of the equation. The purpose of that is to make this left side a perfect square trinomial. So let's do it. So that would be x squared plus 10x plus 25 is equal to negative 16 plus 25. So we added 25 on both sides of the equation. So in that case, this left side is already a perfect square trinomial. Meaning to say, the factors of it are square of binomial. So all we have to do is get the square root of the first and get the square root of the last, then look at the operation of the middle term. Because the square root of first and last, together with the operation of the middle, will form the binomial factors of that perfect square trinomial. So we do have square root of x squared is x, the operation of the middle is plus, but the square root of the last term is 5. Then quantity squared. So its factors are square of binomial. Then it will be equal to negative 16 plus 25 is equal to 9. Then from there, we are now on a case wherein we can make use of extracting the roots. So that is by getting the square root of both sides of the equation. Then cancel the square root sign because that's the perfect root of it. Then what will be left is x plus 5. Then it will be equal to, since 9 is a perfect square, that will be positive negative 3 as the root of 9. Then, we're not yet through because x here still has 5 here. So you have to move 5 to the right side of the equation. When we do that, it will become x is equal to negative 5 is plus or minus 3. Negative 5 plus or minus 3. So from here, this plus or minus here, we are going to separate them. And that's form two equations na sineparate yung plus or minus. So let's do it here. So we do have here, the first equation is x is equal to negative 5 plus 3, while the other one is x is equal to negative 5 minus 3. Again, this is the plus and this is the minus na kinuha natin dito, na pinaghiwalay natin. Then, let's solve for the solutions now. So, we do have the x sub 1. The first solution has negative 5 plus 3. So, recalling your operations on integers. So, we come up here with an answer as negative 2. While for the second solution, we do have here x is equal to, so x sub 2, negative 5 minus 3. So, that would be equal to negative 8. So, therefore, the solutions to the given quadratic equation na x squared plus 10x is equal to negative 16 are negative 2 and negative 8. So, to further understand the lesson on how to solve quadratic equation by completing the square, let's try another example. So, let's have example number 3. Example number 3 is y squared minus 8y is equal to negative 13. So just like example number 2, it was already arranged in the right form of the equation for us to use completing the square. All you have to do now is to right away make use of b over 2. Expression b over 2 quantity squared. What's the value of b? That value of b is the number or the numerical coefficient na kasama ng linear term. The linear term is this. So, yung number na kasama niya ay negative 8. So, substitute natin. It will be equal to negative 8 divided by 2 quantity squared. Then, simplify it. We do have negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Quantity squared, which is equal to negative 4 times negative 4, we do have 16. So that 16 is the number to be added on both sides of the equation to make this left side, again, a perfect square trinomial. So, let's do it. So, y squared minus 8y plus 16 is equal to negative 13 plus 16. So, that is what will happen. Then, since this left side is already a perfect square trinomial, so we can now find its factors. We know that its factors are square of binomial. So, by just simply getting the square root of the first term and square root of last term. Then knowing the operation of the middle term. So we do have square root of y squared is y, square root of 16 is 4, then the operation of the middle is minus. Then quantity squared. Then it will be equal to negative 13 plus 16. That is positive 3. And from there, again, we are going to make use of extracting the roots. So, get the square root of both sides of the equation. So, when we get the square root of that, cancel the square root side, and the 2 ang may iwan ay y minus 4 is equal to, since 3 is a non-perfect square, and there are also no factors of 3 other than 1, wherein one of its factor is a perfect square, then the answer to the square root of 3 will stay as it is. So you are just going to put positive, negative before that square root of 3. So we're not yet through because y here still has negative 4 here. So all you have to do is just simply move negative 4 to the right side of the equation. So pag ginawa mo yun, you'll have y is equal to positive 4 plus or minus the square root. Oh, this is already the solution. So if you want to be what you call this, yung solution, kasi sinasabi natin, there are two solutions for a given quadratic equation. So, pag-iwalayin natin dalawa. So, first solution, or y sub 1 is equal to 4 plus square root of 3. Then, the other one is y sub 2, which is equal to 4 minus square root of 3. But we are already accepting if your answer is like this. Ito is already enough when you answer a problem just like this. But if you want to be tawag doon, if you want to be sure that you are getting two solutions of the given quadratic equation, pwede mo paghiwalayin yung dalawa, yung plus or minus. So it will come up with just like this as 4 plus square root of 3 and 4 minus square root of 3. So that's how we answer problem number 3. Okay, so let us answer another example similar to example number 3. So let's have example number 4 na here. So number 4, that is x squared plus 4x minus 1 is equal to 0. So in the example number 4, the constant term is still on the left side of the equation. So the first thing you're going to do is move the constant term to the right side of the equation. Then, when you do that, you'll come up with x squared plus 4x is equal to 1. Then, if it's already in this form of the equation, that's the time now that you're going to make use the expression use of b over 2 quantity squared. So, from there, we know that the value of b is positive 4. So, simply substitute positive 4 to the given expression. We do have here 4 divide by 2 quantity squared. Then, 4 divided by 2 is 2 quantity squared, which is equal to 4. So that number 4 is to be added on both sides of the equation. So it will become x squared plus 4x then plus 4 equal to 1 plus 4. So in that case, this left side of the equation is already a perfect square trinomial. So we can come up now with factors of it. So square root of the first and last term, then the operation of the middle. Square root of x squared ay x. The operation of the middle is plus. Square root of the last term is 2. Then quantity squared. So meaning to say, ang factors nito are two identical binomials. Two identical binomials. Ibig sabihin, dalawang ganito yung factors of this trinomial, which is what we call perfect square trinomial. Equal to 1 plus 4, that would be 5. Then from here, let's make use of extracting the roots for us to remove square root sign here and the 2, the square. Then, what will be left is x plus 2, which is equal to, since 5 is not a perfect square and it's also there's no also factors of 5 or in one of these factors is a perfect square, then it will stay as it is. You're just going to positive negative before that square root of 5. Then the next thing we are going to do is to move 2 to the right side of the equation for us to have the solution. So let's continue it here. So we do have here x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus square root of 5. Sinasabi natin, this answer is already acceptable even if you will not separate the two solutions na x na yung positive tsaka yung negative. But if you want to do it, pwede rin naman. So the first solution will be x of 1 is equal to negative 2 plus square root of 5, and the other one is x of 2, second solution as negative 2 minus the square root of 5. So these are the two solutions. Let's have here example number 5. So what if the case is like this? So number 5, we do have 3x squared minus 12x plus 6 is equal to 0. So in the case of that, so if your constant term is on the left side, so let's move the constant term to the right side. Then, since the given quadratic equation, ang value ng a niya is greater than 1 according to the steps that we have mentioned earlier, so we can make use of completing the square. Aside from it was arranged in the form wherein the constant term is on the right side, its a should be equal to 1. In the case of this, its a is 3. So we have to make that 3 equal to 1. That is by dividing all the terms by 3. By dividing a number by itself is equal to 1. So you are not just only going to divide 3 on the first term. Since kasama niya itong tatlong to, yung dalawa pa, so you're also going to divide 3 on the numerical coefficients or the constant terms on the second and the third term. So in that case, magiging 3 divided by 3 is 1, magiging x squared na lang to. Then minus 12 divided by 3, that would be 4. Then copy x. Then 6 divided by 3, that would be 2. So since ililipat natin siya sa kabila, that will become negative 2. Kasunod tayo. Then, from there, we are now going to use b over 2 quantity squared. So, mas madali if we're going to make use the value of b of the equation in simplified form. So, that is this equation. So, So the value of b there is 4. So substitute it here, magiging 4 divided by 2 quantity squared. Then 4 divided by 2 is 2 quantity squared, which is equal to 4. So that 4 is to be added on both sides of the equation. So that will become x squared minus 4x plus 4 equal to negative 2 plus 4. So get the factors of this left side because it's already a perfect square trinomial. So get the square root and the operation. So cancel that square root sign. We do have here x minus 2 quantity squared. With x minus square root of x squared ay x, square root of 4 ay 2. The operation of the middle is minus. So it will be equal to negative 2 plus 4. That would be positive 2. Then get the square root of both sides of the equation. So by cancelling the square root sign now, then it will be x minus 2 is equal to, again, 2 is not a perfect square. Also, it has no factor. So in one of its factor other than 1 is a perfect square. So it will stay as it is. You're just going to attach positive, negative before that square root of 2. Then move negative 2 to the right side of the equation. So it will become, let's continue it here. So x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. So this is already accepted as your solution. So we can say that the solutions are 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. Or gusto mas maging sigurado pa, your first solution is 2 plus square root of 2, and the other one is x sub 2 is equal to 2 minus square root of 2. So for us to come up with the two solutions to the given quadratic equation. Kasunod tayo. Next. So example number 6. An example number 6, the given here is x squared minus 3x minus 5 is equal to 0. Hindi ulit siya naka-arrange in the right form. So, we have to move negative 5 to the right side of the equation. So, that will become x squared minus 3x is equal to 5. Then, from there, we are going to make use now the expression b over 2 quantity squared. So, the value of b in the given equation is negative 3. Substitute it. That would be negative 3 over 2 quantity squared. So, hindi siya exactly divisible. So, even if it's not exactly divisible, pwede pa rin tayo mag-answer. That is by distributing this exponent on both numerator and denominator. So, we'll come up here with negative 3 squared is 9 over 2 squared is 4. So, we'll have 9 over 4 as the number to be added on both sides of the equation. Paano nangyari yun? Naging ganito yun. Yung ginawa dito, ganito yun. Negative 3 squared, quantity squared, over 2 squared. So, negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. 2 times 2 is positive 4. That's why we do have 9 over 4. That number is to be added on both sides of the equation. So, we do have here x squared minus 3x plus that number 9 over 4 is equal to 5 plus 9 over 4. Kasi nga sabi natin, pwede maging fraction. Kasi nga, since quadratic equation yan, yung value ng a, b, and c natin can be real numbers. So, those are real numbers. So, pwedeng fraction. So, you don't have to worry about this. It's because it's already a perfect square trinomial. Yung gamit nito is for us to make that left side a perfect square trinomial. So, just getting the square root of first and last and operation of the middle. Square root ng x squared ay x minus square root ng 9 ay 3. Square root ng 2 ay, square root ng 4 ay 2. So, we do have x minus 3 over 2 quantity squared. So, it will be equal now to this one. So, you need the LCD. The LCD is 4. That will be 5 times 4 is 20. And 4 divided by 4 is 1 times 9 is 9. So plus 9. So simplify this one. When we simplify that, we do have here x minus 3 over 2 quantity squared is equal now to 29 over 4. Then, let's apply extracting the roots. So, to cancel out the square root sign here, may iwan ay, continue natin dito, may iwan ay x minus 3 over 2 is equal now to 29 is a non-perfect square, so that would be positive, negative, square root of 29 because wala na rin siyang factor, while 2 has square root of 4 ay 2. So, if you're going to look at it, move natin yung constant term to the right side. So, once we move it to the right side, it will become x is equal to 3 over 2 plus or minus the square root of 29 over 2. So, since both of them are with the same denominator, o natatawag na similar fractions, pwede natin pag-isahin yung denominator niya. So, we'll come up with the final answer as x is equal to 3 plus or minus the square root of 29 all over 2. So, we'll have that as the answer for number 6. Kasi sabi natin, even if hindi natin siya paghiwalayin, kung hindi naman exact yung solutions niya, enough na yun, na acceptable na yun as an answer, even if hindi na natin siya paghiwalayin. So that's how we solve examples of quadratic equation.
Nagustuhan nyo yung video na to, so just hit like, share this video, and also subscribe IGOP Lord official channel. So, importante is for you to subscribe the IGOP Lord official channel. And also, don't forget to comment down below if you do have anything to say. So, hanggang sa muli, goodbye!